This is one of the most stable, democratic, and peaceful countries in Africa. It has its own borders, its own military, its own currency, its own government. It holds free elections, and it's safer than half the continent. But according to the UN, the African Union, the United States, and literally every government on Earth, this country does not exist. No flag, no passport anyone accepts, no seat at the UN, no recognition, nothing. It's not Taiwan, not Palestine, not Kosovo, not Western Sahara. This is Somaliland, a country that's been fully independent for over 30 years, and the entire world pretends it's not real. Why? Why does the world reward dictators, warlords, and failed states with recognition, but punishes a peaceful democracy by pretending it doesn't exist? Because international diplomacy is a rigged game. It's not about democracy. It's not about stability. It's not about peace. It's about power, corruption, hypocrisy. This is a story of war, of betrayal, of broken promises, of corrupt governments, of double standards, of a world that loudly preaches democracy, but quietly crushes those who actually practice it. This is the story of Somaliland, a nation the world is desperate to ignore. And it's one of the most insane stories in modern geopolitics. A country that shouldn't exist. To understand why Somaliland is a country that technically doesn't exist, we have to go back. Not 30 years, not even 100 years, but over 130 years to the scramble for Africa. In the late 19th century, as European powers carved up the African continent like a cake, the British established a protectorate called British Somaliland. Meanwhile, the Italians colonized what became known as Italian Somaliland to the south. These were two entirely separate colonies, with separate administrations, cultures, and legal systems. The people of British Somaliland had more in common with neighboring Ethiopia than they did with the South. In 1960, British Somaliland gained independence. For exactly 5 days. It became the independent state of Somaliland on June 26, 1960. But within a week, it voluntarily joined with Italian Somaliland to form the Republic of Somalia, a union that was supposed to be a marriage of equals. It wasn't. Almost immediately, power consolidated in Mogadishu, the southern capital. The north was neglected. Infrastructure, jobs, and development flowed south. Corruption exploded. Tensions grew. Then came the nightmare. In the 1980s, dictator Siad Barre began systematically attacking the northern regions. Entire cities were bombed. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed. Over 500,000 people fled across the border into Ethiopia. For Somaliland, this was the final straw. When Barre's regime collapsed in 1991, Somaliland declared independence, and since that day, they've operated as a de facto independent nation. How Somaliland functions. Without recognition today, Somaliland has everything a country should have: a parliament, a president, a judiciary, its own military forces. It holds democratic elections that international observers generally rate as free and fair. In fact, it's one of the very few functioning democracies in East Africa. It has its own currency, the Somaliland shilling. It controls its borders. It issues its own passports. It runs its own economy, complete with banks, telecoms, and an incredibly successful mobile payment system. And it's safe. In a region plagued by warlords, pirates, and Islamist militants like Al-Shabaab, Somaliland is an island of stability. Tourists actually visit. Businesses operate. Kids go to school without fear of suicide bombings. So, if it walks like a country, talks like a country, and functions like a country, why isn't it recognized as a country? Why no one recognizes Somaliland? The short answer is geopolitics. The longer answer is that the African Union has a strict policy of not changing colonial borders. After decades of post-colonial conflict, African leaders decided that if they allowed borders to be redrawn, the entire continent could fragment. Recognizing Somaliland would set a precedent. Other breakaway regions might follow, like Biafra in Nigeria, Cabinda in Angola, or the Azawad region in Mali. Somalia, unsurprisingly, opposes Somaliland's independence, and the international community, including the United States, the European Union, and China, all officially respect Somalia's territorial integrity. Then, there are global politics. Most countries don't want to be the first to recognize Somaliland for fear of damaging relations with Somalia or setting awkward international precedents. Even when Somaliland has approached countries like the US, the UK, or Gulf states offering military bases, trade, and cooperation, the answer is always the same. We support Somalia's sovereignty, the Taiwan connection. There is, however, one major exception. In 2020, Somaliland established formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, another country that technically doesn't exist in the eyes of the UN. The two have exchanged embassies. They collaborate on healthcare, technology, and trade. In fact, Somaliland is one of only a handful of places in the world where the flag of Taiwan flies over a diplomatic building. This mini-alliance of unrecognized countries has created a unique political phenomenon. Two nations that the world pretends don't exist, cooperating as if they do. Life without recognition. But what does it mean to live in a country that no one recognizes? It means your passport is useless in most of the world. It means no access to international banking, no loans from the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, no foreign aid from most major donors. It means that your students can't easily study abroad. Your businesses struggle to access global markets. Your airlines can't operate international flights. And yet, despite all this, Somaliland survives. It's built a thriving livestock industry exporting to the Middle East. It's developed one of the most sophisticated mobile banking systems in Africa. It's created a functioning democracy in a region where that's almost unheard of. The geopolitical stakes. But Somaliland's location gives it leverage. It sits on the Gulf of Aden, near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a choke point for global shipping between Europe and Asia. The US, China, the UAE, and Turkey all have military interests in the region. There have been negotiations, sometimes secret, sometimes public, about establishing foreign military bases in Somaliland. The Emiratis have already invested heavily in Berbera port, turning it into a major logistics hub. There are rumors that the US is considering deeper security cooperation as China expands its naval presence in nearby Djibouti. If the Red Sea becomes a major flashpoint in future geopolitical conflicts, Somaliland's value could skyrocket. What the future holds, will Somaliland ever be recognized? It's possible, but unlikely in the near future. If Somalia collapses further or agrees to a peaceful divorce, it could happen. If enough global powers decide that stability matters more than borders, it could happen. Or it might remain in limbo for decades. A country that exists, but officially doesn't. Conclusion. Somaliland is a living contradiction, a country that the world refuses to see, but that absolutely exists. A place that proves borders are imaginary, until someone powerful decides they're not. And maybe, just maybe, Somaliland shows us something even bigger. That recognition isn't what makes a country real. It's the people who live there, the governments they build, the borders they defend, and whether the world accepts it or not, Somaliland exists. If you found this video eye-opening, consider subscribing. We dive into the stories that the world often ignores, forgotten nations, hidden conflicts, and invisible borders. One click helps us bring these stories to light. Subscribe, and thanks for watching.